Today we'll be talking about mining non-renewable mineral resources. This is an important topic because it's basically how and where we get the minerals that make up everything in our daily lives. All of our conveniences, all of our ways of life, all depend on mineral resources. The things we have comes from the earth, and we have to locate, mine, and extract, and then process those minerals and make them into the things that we use every day. This is something we take for granted. All right, we soon forget the things that aren't visible in our lives. It's an out of sight, out of mind type issue, but it's very important to understand this topic, and especially how it relates to the environment. So, in regards to mining is somewhat of a paradox. This is a tough one because we know that there's a huge environmental cost, but we absolutely need the things that we have and use. So mining is something that's so environmentally destructive, yet it's fueling our future. All of our technologies, all of our modern day conveniences, our transportations, everything relies on mining the minerals and non-renewable resources we need. So throughout this lecture, and as you internalize the environmental impact of this industry, just keep in mind that it's somewhat of a paradox because we need to do this. All right, so you'll see, hopefully, the importance of things like recycling and keeping those minerals that are able to be recycled into the materials economy. All right, so there's less of a need to mine new minerals. You're always going to have mining, and you're always going to need new minerals, but let's keep the ones in the system that we already have so that we can reuse them. You'll see through the environmental impacts that we need to regulate, monitor, and hopefully minimize the environmental impacts of mining. Since the environmental impacts are so great, and they're usually in environmentally sensitive areas or near people, there's going to be a need to reduce those impacts. All right, impacts on things like ecosystems and diversity, both land and aquatic, impacts on water and groundwater, impacts on the atmosphere and human health. Okay, so this lecture is going to focus on the environmental impacts of mining, but you have to remember that these things all happen while providing us with everything we have. Everything from our energy needs to the technology in our hands. All the electronics that we've come to rely on, the wiring, the capacitors, the processors, the jewelry that we wear, the cars and the planes and our transportation. The need for especially things like rare earth metals has been on the increase in the last decade or two, especially as mobile phone industry has exploded. Okay, and things are getting smaller and more available. We just need to remember that all these things that we're going to talk about today, from tantalum to coal, all come from the ground. They all come from the earth. All right, you have to remember that. And there's impacts, environmental impacts of locating and extracting and processing these ores and minerals. And that's what we're going to get into. The global production of rare earth metals has increased, like I said, but it's the country of China where it has really exploded, which is where most of our electronics are made and produced. So the need for these things in China has greatly increased over the years. And if you look here in other countries, not so much. But China, because of that huge demand, is putting a stress on our planet in the mining industry. So here's where a lot of the need for these things comes from. Let's start here with the types of mining. The first one is to literally dig. All right, there's a couple different terms and methods for that. Artisanal mining or small scale mining is where we're going to start here. And another type of surface mining that's more primitive is called placer mining, and that's where you can picture people panning for gold or dredging in a stream bed or an alluvial fan deposit, which is basically just gravel and soil. But to literally dig is a very primitive and energy intensive process. With this type of mining, I'm going to bring up the world of conflict minerals. I think this is something that everybody should be aware of, and one of the most famous places where this is happening is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that's going to be our case study here for this type of mining. So let's go through this real quick, and here's just a couple of pictures of what we're talking about here, literally panning small-scale operations. The DRC is very poor. They've been ravaged by war and corruption, and these people make very little money during the day. They're stuck in these positions where they have to work very, very hard all day for little wage, if any. And sometimes they're provided with food. And in the top left there, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for these rare earth metals that are used in today's electronics. So which ones are we looking for here in the Democratic Republic of Congo? You can look at this chart and think of it as the 3TG minerals. All right, that's a nice way to remember this. And what I'm talking about is tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold. And if you look here, tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold, one common theme throughout all four of these metals are electronics. Okay? And in fact, it's the number one use for 3 out of the 4, where the number one use for gold is jewelry. But all four of these metals we use all over the place in our society, in transportation, medical application, lighting in regards to tungsten, and jewelry with gold. But very, very, very useful metals. And let's talk a little bit about tantalum. Tantalum is extremely corrosion resistant. All right, it's very, very rare, but it's a nice substitute for platinum. And tantalum is used in your iPhone and your smartphone as a capacitor. And you know, if you have an iPhone or a smartphone in your pocket, most likely carrying a little piece of the Congo with you every day. It's inert and just extremely useful in electronics. And take a look at this column here all the way to the right, and although it's hidden, what we're looking at here is the percent of the world's supply in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So in regards to tantalum, there's a lot of tantalum in the Congo, and the smuggling and the export of its ore, which is coltan, has really helped fuel war in the Congo. And we'll talk a little bit about that war, because what happens is the mines are usually operated by corrupt government officials or even, you know, military leaders, and when they have control over the ore, they're the ones overseeing the smuggling of this, and the money that they get is usually used for, you know, weapons which fuels further violence. So these are the things we want to be aware of so that we can make decisions in our lives to not support these types of activities. Alright, so the 3TG minerals are something to be aware of. They're something to know and to keep in the back of your mind, because these are the ones that are so used in society. Alright, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is smack dab right in the middle of Africa there in the rainforest belt. And just a quick little history, because it is very complicated. There were 2 Congo Wars. The first Congo War started in and around 1996 to 1997. And then what they call the Second Congo War from 1998 to about 2003. But hostilities still continue. All right, there's a very fragile state there right now in regards to government. But both wars, if you combine them, were the deadliest wars in modern African history. So around 5.4 million people died in that about 8-year history. Most of those people died from disease and starvation. Okay, there was mass exodus out of the Congo. All right, and again, it's conflict minerals that were helping the rebels and really aiding their financial situation, where they would take that money and then buy weapons. Alright, so take a look down here just to finish this slide here in the bottom right. I like this picture. It was out of a National Geographic article. There's a great article in National Geographic. You know, just take a look at this young man's face right here, literally just watching the bowl of rice, waiting for his spoonful ration for the day. Probably worked very, very hard. in the mine all day, along with this gentleman too. They're just waiting for their spoonful of ration of rice for the day. So just very powerful imagery coming out of the Congo. And I like this too because it shows you down here in the lower left the minerals that we're talking about and where the mines are located. Most of the mines are located along the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, near the Kivu River. And this geography is important because if you look here where these mines are, it makes it very easy to smuggle the ore into places like Rwanda and Uganda and Tanzania. These are the places where there's a hookup between local governments, and you can smuggle these minerals out into these places and then out into the world. So the geography of the Congo becomes very important. All right, you can also see here the difference between the dense forest and the savanna, and where agriculture is occurring. So the lighter blue is actually the dense forest. That's the rainforest. Mining operations occur in and around endemic species and endangered species. This is where things like the silverback gorilla, it's a species with very low numbers. So there's a clash between economy, military, people, and the environment in this situation. Very, very ugly situation. More powerful images of what's going on there. All right, we're talking about just kids being forced into these situations. Rape is used as a weapon to both intimidate and control. So this is something that we do not want to support. We want to make sure that the companies we're buying from are also not supporting the world of conflict minerals. This is not a place to grow up in. Right? All this for this. Just for your knowledge, this is something that I found interesting. These are the electronics companies that are ranked by their progress on eliminating conflict minerals from their products. So these green ones at the top are pretty much the companies that we should feel good to support, like HP, Intel. There's a couple other here. Apple has been making strides. Same thing with Microsoft and Dell. All right, but more importantly, which are the companies that we should really let them know through consumer choice or even consumer action that is peaceful, that we know and wish that they would change their ways in regards to conflict minerals. Companies like Sony, LG, Samsung, Toshiba, and if you look down here, the camera companies, and then this is the one that really say no to. All right, so there you go. That's a nice little image for you to help you make consumer choices in regards to conflict minerals.